Well, hello, my name is Freek. I'm a student developer at Iconica for almost 2 years. Currently working on my graduation project. And during my time at Iconica, on most of the apps, around 80%, I made the initial project with Flutter, Dart. And that usually, if you make a lot of projects, like 8 or 7, then you notice similarities between projects, and you also start to irritate yourself about doing the same stuff every time, but with some tweaking, like different names and maybe some other options. So that's why I decided to create a tool application that I will demonstrate in this meetup that is made in Flutter as an app, and that also creates a Flutter app through different means. First, I will talk a bit about the repetitive tasks that are there for every project. Almost every project, but these the long ones. Then I will talk about Mason and Mason CLI. That has been the inspiration of it, and also the main tool I use to create apps efficiently without too much code needed. After that, I will talk about commands and the CLIs. Commands should be working on all platforms. So you need to think about Windows and Unix systems like Linux and Mac. And the CLIs are used also for integration with Firebase and GitHub and CodeMagic. After that, I will talk about applying it all to code that will lead to the prototype. Then I will demonstrate the prototype and talk about documentation of it afterwards, because documentation is very important. And distributing the prototype or the potential application is also handy, because, well, developing apps takes a lot of time. And if you can share it or potentially sell it to other companies, you can ease the process of creating it, because you get more money for it. So repetitive tasks that I do for usually every project. The Flutter project starts with Flutter create, because you can create a new folder, there you make your app. There are a lot of flags. I think most of the developers here don't know them by heart and have to look them up every time. That it isn't that hard, but you usually forget stuff. That's why I think it's ideal to automate the stuff, because forgetting little details about the project can be very annoying later on. After that, you have the new Flutter project, the new Flutter app. It is usually full of stuff you don't want, full of comments. So you have to remove those. So removing comments is one of the tasks I usually do on projects. And you also get nowadays the skeleton app, which is nice, but yeah, it has some constructions you don't want. So that's more work for deleting the files. And then most projects share features. Nowadays, most of our apps use multi-language support. So we always want 2 language files. We always want some basic translations. Most apps have screens. Like, I can't imagine apps without a home screen, and also a splash screen, and usually login screen. So we want to add them basically at the start of the project, taking less time, but it should be configurable. And a lot of dependencies at Iconica we use for every project nowadays. Things like hooks riverpod and Flutter hooks are always used, and Go router as well. So adding those dependencies by default would be saving some time. And one of the most important thing is theming, which is also another point. It would be nice if the tool could be understood by everyone, so also the designers, so they know their theming, like what fonts they want to use, what color they want. In Flutter, you can provide all of those. There's just a color scheme. So configuring the color scheme through UI would be a big improvement. And then doing it through code by a developer, because the designer usually knows what the primary color is of the app and the background color. So if there was some UI, they could just fill it in or potentially use a color picker, which would be very nice. And why I'm talking about a project, a project here is usually more than just an app. We also need Git and we need CI/CD. So the tool can easily make a Git repository and also upload it to GitHub automatically with the correct settings for maintenance. And through the process, you also want to use the correct commit messages. So it's not, so you don't have a project that has the first message initial commit, which has 100 files changed. So it's not clear how it was done. So the tool should do commit messages while it's busy working. CI/CD we use for every project, almost. So adding GitHub actions and Bitbucket pipelines. Usually only need to change the project name in the files. That's the only thing we do different. And setting up Firebase and CodeMagic, which we'll also go into more detail later, because that's the next step with the CLI. Well, the basis also I started working on this was Mason and Mason CLI. So we'll give a quick demonstration of Mason. Oh. So Mason, Mason CLI is the tool I use, and Mason is the basis. It's a templating software which has bricks. Bricks are just files with some code. I can't share this with Slack. I think maybe. Oh, yeah. So these are some of the Mason bricks I created as a project. I'm in a test folder below, and then I can use Mason Make Starter, which is sort of the basis of my UI tool. This version just asks you for what's your project name, so standard project. I can just enter, and then the organization name, which is Content Iconica. I can change it, and my new description. You want to install dependencies, additional, yes. I want the Linux platform. Then I want to clear this directory where I'm running it. And now this tool. Something always goes wrong. No. Yeah, this will go fine, probably. But these are just defaults, but I can of course change it. Well, not the Mason tool. Another one I have is the dependency installer, which automatically can add the following dependencies to your project. If you select them, you would usually add the most popular dependencies, and then it adds them. Now it's gonna complain probably. Oh, now it added it to the current folder, although there's no Flutter project. Shouldn't be. Well, that's Mason. So I'll show the documentation. Well, no, I will show one of the bricks, the templates it uses. So this is a brick for a starter project. It's an earlier version. So every project automatically gets following folders for assets, analysis option, which is the customized linter, and then a pipeline, a README, and then basic structure that just creates a home screen and some routing, which is usually needed for every project. So I worked on this, but then, well, this is true code, and nobody likes CLIs really, especially not designers and non-programmers. So of course, you want the questions that Mason asks should be done through UI and not through command line. So that's Mason make. Yeah, Mason CLI has a large documentation. There's lots of options. But we, from now on, I will only mention Mason, which is the building block used by Mason CLI, which is also used in the prototype. We will replace Mason CLI. Okay. So the command line. Next thing is there needs to be a structure to run commands in the process. And well, most of the developers here use Mac OS. I personally use Linux. We also have some Windows people. I have Windows myself at home. So at least it needs to run on Mac OS because, well, we all use it for work, but other platforms are handy as well. So every command needs to run, or you need to find alternatives for Windows. And it's also better to use I prefer to use commands like Flutter create instead of the alternative would be to take a Flutter project that is already created and then just replacing all the strings that are mentioned, like you create example project and you just replace example project with your name. And you also have a new project, but every time Flutter updates or every time things will break. So using Flutter create is a safer and more maintainable way. And then we have the extra utilities like Firebase CLI, GitHub CLI, and CodeMagic. For Firebase, you can see right here, there's a whole CLI on which you can query GitHub. So you can create your repos and create your pull requests. You don't need UI or website. All done through code, which I will use for the prototype. And Firebase is the same. Creating a Firebase project can take some time. And it's also, I think most developers never do it at least are not familiar with the process. So it would be better to let a tool do it, because that can be documented and the tool can't leave the company. So yeah, always you're not dependent on that one person that knows the GitHub or Firebase or CodeMagic. You just develop the tool, keep the tool maintained. Applying this in code. So the goal of the application is to fetch a lot of information about a project through UI. So that's the project name, the organization name, the App Store name, the Android name, the iOS name, the theming. Fetch all this information and then install it or start a process, the installation process that transforms the configuration into a new Flutter app. And while doing it, preferably showing how long it will take. And then during this process, of course, the developer can get some coffee, and it should be done within 15 minutes, depending on how much dependencies are the most expensive. Fetching dependencies and some other Flutter tasks. The file manipulation is super fast, done in seconds. Way faster than people can do it, at least. And the goal, of course, is that this tool could be used by anyone without knowledge of Flutter or commands or CLIs. And it would be nice if the configuration can be saved with JSON. So, for instance, if someone creates a project and a week later we need a project that looks a bit like it, we just take the configuration, we load it in, and we modify it a bit. So we don't have to start from scratch configuring it. And also, when your laptop crashes, you have a backup. So now I will give a demonstration of the prototype. It is a bit, don't look too much at the UI. It's not, it's a prototype. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, so I just made some spare time. I think the first thing is at least this is the easy version, the creating a package. This can create it's a bit, I think, yeah. You need to click on the text exactly, otherwise the button doesn't register. So, well, usually we try to create components with reusable code. So I make my new component. I don't need to use underscores. Shouldn't be. That's also one of the things, the naming convention in Dart and Flutter are done by the package or by the installer. So you don't need to remember if it's dashes or underscores or whatever. It should be done for you. So now I select the location, my system. This is an important mark. If I check this one, it will also really create it on our GitHub repository. So it's actually published live. Yeah, that's the most ugly UI. Selecting the platforms. Some of it's generated with AI to make it easier. So that's my excuse. So if I now do install, it's now working. There's no indication how long it will take, but once it's finished, I can now I'm done with the basis of my pack. Now I can just write the actual code. So this is a clean package, which I could also have done manually, but the pub spec, yeah, I will share it with the stream. So the pep spec is cleaned. Usually there are a lot of comments. Our standard linter is added. Changelog is added, describing the initial release. Commits are done, and I think there's even a remote, or so the branch is pushed to get GitHub. So now the only thing is, I need to add my code in here, but at least I don't have to add the license and the contributing guide that we use for every project. Getting more fixed, making the process easier. The entire README. So now we'll show the main application, which is more of a gimmick sideway thing. So creating a project. Of course, we need to provide a project name. So Meetup Iconica. App name. Meetup Iconica. And you can have whatever description. Here it's a bit more important what platforms you're targeting. So I want Android and well, at least those two platforms. And then the folder. This is the basic settings for every project, which you also saw in the starter brick. Though it didn't work correctly, it should work. Now, this is the more interesting part. So here you would enable or disable features for your app. And only the splash screen I have implemented with Mason. So there's a Mason brick for a splash screen. But of course, you could add all features that are shared between apps through this page. This is an empty page, but here you would add all your screens for your app and then determine how you can go from page to page. And then all the code would be generated. The theme creation for adding your fonts, your text sizes, and the colors of your app. And the dependency, you don't see dependencies here, but it will automatically install 3 dependencies at least. But here would be the 150 most popular dependencies based on also filtered, like for Firebase, we have around 10 dependencies that are being used. There would be a drop down for Firebase. Then this is miscellaneous things like the adding a Git repository. That's the same as the other one from the package. Pipelines, actions, and the lint. Usually we want all of those things on every project, but there may be cases when we don't want internationalization. Then you can disable them. And now it's installing. It's creating a Flutter app on my system in the test folder. And after it, I think it's pushing it to GitHub. And of course, opening it in Visual Studio Code. This takes a lot longer. My laptop is starting to heat up. It's doing something. Demonstration. I think it's gonna run. It's yeah, this may take a while. It's doing Flutter run for Linux on the apps. So this is the new app created with a blank home screen without theming, which is really ugly. All right, yeah, well, don't need to show this. And here's the new Flutter app, which is more interesting. So the tool automatically created this project, which is a bit bigger than the last one. It also has dependencies and another analysis options. And here now you can see it adds home screen route, providers, the routes for the app, UI for splash screen. Splash screen is empty for now, and configuration for a theme. It should be filled, and a pipeline for Bitbucket. He's not here, but for GitHub and Bitbucket, there should be pipelines. That's the demonstration. I will quickly show the, I think the GitHub, where the projects are added. Okay, so this is the test package. That's just automatically uploaded, saving the developer some time. Yeah. So here's the apparently mistyped Flutter. So this it also added a nice Flutter tag clarification. So this all done through code. Usually there are no errors, so running it 10 times should give 10 times the same output, which is nice. Yeah. Oh yeah, the demo works on all desktop platforms. Oh yeah, I will show some of the code without going too technical, because I know not all of you are programmers and interested in all the details of code. But I try to add some structure in it to make it logical. So the configuration, there's an app configuration. That's the object or the class that you try to fill with the UI. So it has some defaults. And these are all the things right now you can add. So app name, organization name, and theme settings, all complex objects which are empty right now, but it's a prototype. And then once it's all configured, it runs the app installer. The app installer has a structure and different steps. It undergoes in a certain way. So adding more, for instance, if you wanted to add another screen with some extra options, you would expand the app settings, the app configuration, and you would just add your new step here. And then it gets added to the process. It should be very clear how the tool works. Like it starts with setting up the project. So making sure people have the latest Flutter version, creating the app, adding some dependencies, removing files, and then it adds the starter brick, which is the basic folder structure for Iconica projects, adding dependencies, all one after each other, waiting. So there's no problem with race conditions. And one of the features like Splash, this could be way more complicated. Would have features like login that modify multiple screens, also for the handlers. And the same for the package installer. Smart, shorter version. So that's, I think, code. There's all the pages. Most of this is generated with Copilot. Or once you make one thing, it knows the rest. The tool is also translated for Dutch and English already. So, of course, I have my laptop on English, so you only see the English version. The documentation. So this tool itself is sort of a documentation of the steps that we use to create a Flutter app. Until, of course, we create our manual widgets and our manual because it can't be automatically generated. Could use things like ZAP for that. Oh yeah, and so it's documentation itself, but the tool should also be easy to modify and understand by different people. So adding more at each step should be documented. Like, what does the create project step do? How should I modify it? Cool. I have multiple developers working on it for multiple years, and people can go away. You don't want to lose the knowledge. That's towards the documentation. So distributing the application. It's be nice if you could license the tool for other companies to use. So they just pay €100 or something per year per computer. There are different ways of creating this. I would think the easiest solution would be to just encrypt the files it uses. So people need to log in to the website and get their key. Then, of course, you have the problem with account sharing and making sure that one person that has a key doesn't decrypt it for all, so everyone can use your tool for free. That's why an online version, the web-hosted version, is safer. It also takes up more resources. The web-hosted version would just have a website where you create this configuration, and it sends off to VPS that just runs all the code and gives you a zip with the output. That's your starting project, the base files. So it will save you, I think, at least half a day for a big project. Yeah, those are, I think, the two options: licensing it for a local version or just using a web-hosted one where you always need to log in and we can check everything. Still have the problem with account sharing, an online version, but more easy to track. Are there any questions? Yeah, the tool, yeah, I don't know, the UI, it's kind of ugly, but it's a product. Well, it's a prototype. Just meant I was testing using Mason with some code and also commands, and then the CLI. I think all parts of the process are possible. Now it's also the question, like, of course, the fallacy is a bit fun. You don't want to spend 3 weeks writing a tool that automates a task that can be done in 2 hours, which you only do 10 times a year. So you need to minimize the time spent on automating it, and also try to make as many apps as possible, because making apps is now easy, but maintaining the tool can be hard. Also with breaking changes. I try to avoid the breaking changes by making everything dynamic as much as possible by using Flutter Create and that sort of stuff. Any more questions?
went a completely different direction than I initially intended to go. More on that in a bit. But first, I want to talk to you about who am I. I've done it every meetup, there are new people, so new reasons to say who I am. I'm Joey Boerwinkel. I work here at Iconica for nearly 2 years now. I'm a team lead. A bunch of people that sometimes listen to what I do. I'm a trainer. That means that I tell other people about Flutter mainly, but also some other technologies, and sometimes how to behave like a professional developer, which I try to do occasionally. And I'm also a media developer, so I do touch code. As you probably have seen, I'm talking about Material Design 3 in Flutter. And if you are really a keen reader, then you probably have seen that there's no UX or design or anything related to that on the screen. That is true. And that also means that considering that aspect of it, I don't consider myself qualified enough, but I've read up on some things, so I maybe can discuss some parts of it that might interest you. And this meetup was, this intention initially was the subject of this meetup was regarding how to implement it in Flutter and how to optimize using Material 3 in Flutter and to be more efficient at building UIs. I've quickly figured out that there's not so much to talk about Flutter part, but more about the material design part, what has changed, meaning that the Flutter part is actually quite easy to use. The material design part, however, is that's a longer story and there's more to it. And there's definitely some UX aspects to it, which I will probably take some wrong notes about it. And in that case, I hope for all the UX people in this room to maybe correct me or ask questions. Maybe I can expound on it a bit more. So an introduction. I'm going to talk about the history of material design. Where does it come from? Where has it developed? And what are the ideas behind it? Then I'm going to go after that. I've talked about that a little bit more. I will compare version 2 and 3 and talk to you about the difference. I'll show you some of the differences. I've got a short demo about it. Then I'm going to dive into the code of the demo I wrote and show you how to use it in practice in Flutter. Actually, in Flutter, generally, you half the time will already dive into material design because most of the components in there are already material design. That's why there's also not that much to talk about in Flutter, but still enough. And then I'm also going to show you a couple of packages that are that have been recommended that I have not incorporated in the demo, but are very useful for us to use in development and maybe for other people in the room to use as well. And in the end, I will go over some discussion, and I will have 3 statements on which I would ask you to discuss. I will throw a statement out there, and I want you to give me feedback. Say I'm for, I'm against. And if you are for or against, I would love to hear the reasons. And we'll have 5 minutes of each one statement where we have an open discussion. And I'll try to be more of a, how would you say that, debate master in that situation. So let's start by some material design history. My own history is that back in 2015, I started using material design in websites built at my first college level degree. It was a CSS framework, or Materialize.io. Some people might have heard of it. It's a pretty popular framework, especially among students, to quickly get a so-so design website up and running. But the actual design of actual start of material design was in 2014 when they announced it at Google I/O. The initial idea was to have a common design principle that is visible across all Android devices, so everyone could recognize them as Android devices, and that other people can also use that design standard to be more in a Google-like. Be more Google-like, let's put it that way. They have three concepts, and if you look at material design 1 and 2, they explicitly talk about these concepts, and 3, they just throw them out and be like, material design is just a generic design principle. They don't talk about the principles, at least on the front page anymore. The idea stayed the same. So everything is a material is a metaphor. Everything is a material. It's something touchable, something actually visible. That means that it's as if you were cutting pieces of paper out. You color each different piece of paper in a opaque color, and then you just use those Christmas cards which your aunt makes, where they have like cut out and they put like tiny pieces of foam between them and then just layer them on top. That's the idea for material design, that creates that natural shadow and natural lighting. It is over the top, and it uses motion. So whenever you click, whenever you tap, whenever you drag, it indicates that something is moving. So transitions and all those kinds of things. So far of the first material design. And this is an example of the first material design, what they made in terms of apps. It looks a lot like what you see in Flutter nowadays. It has more straight edges, and it has it's a lot like material design too. There's some differences. I don't exactly know the precise differences in that case, but they are. But you can kind of see what they are. They remind you of like phones of the early 2000s, 2010s. Flutter has not used these because Flutter only came to fruition in 2018. So in that case, this wasn't really a thing anymore, because in 2018, Material Design 2 was released. They went for more rounded corners, added more white space, colorful icons. They had a custom style, and it's been the Flutter standard for the longest time. Actually, it's been the Flutter standard. It's even the Flutter standard right now. Material Design 3 is sort of, it's not enabled by default. You have to choose to enable it, but it's as easy as setting something, one thing from false to true. Here's some example of a Material 2 app. This is actually my demo. I made it yesterday, I think, and then there's some there's a few screens in which you can see what the material design is. You can see that there's more white space, there's more use of rounded corners, and there's the buttons are quite squarish, and they generally use all caps design. I did not use that here, but that's because I didn't follow Material Design 2 in this case, as in the principle behind it. Continuing to Material Design 3. Just going over them really quickly because I've several ideas ahead. What I want to say. Material Design 3 is also known as Material U. It's been announced at Google I/O 2021. It's the idea that design is more adapted to a per user instance instead of a how'd you say it, thank you, general use, indeed. And it is more bold, but it also is a more flat design. The colors are more toned down. I'm not sure I'm even using the right terms here, but everything is a bit larger and a bit more obvious, whilst the contrast is lower. Let's say in this case, and here's the same app, but in Material Design 3. And I am going to just go over what it looks like. You see that everything is larger around those areas. The cards have a little, the text is more more defined. The buttons are more embedded into the area, and that you can say at the bottom here there's a bit larger, and the same is for the dialogue over here. You see a bit more to the design, but for example, a forum, it is barely a difference. But the rest I'll leave that up to you, because that's what is new. I kind of explained it. There's if you go to there's a beautiful website. I'm just going to show you it in a bit, where they basically explain everything, what has changed. You can look per component. You can see what is different between Material 3 and Material 2. And you can also try out those components, and you can even go as far as load in color configuration from the site to immediately put into your app. So an entire predefined theme. So the thing Freek was trying to build, or theme definition, they made it already. So this, at least if you want to follow the Material 3 color schemes, that is. I'll show you the website actually. I think I have it open. So let's go here and go to Material Design. And I like dark mode better. So what you can do is there's a whole new set of parts here. There's a lot of about style on the site. So there's at some point there's let me just there's a whole description of the color system. To be honest, I myself am colorblind. I read through this and I do get a bit what they're saying, but most of it is like, so I guess there is really more to a designer's job than just coloring and just to quote a colleague of mine. There's a lot. There's actually really a lot of interesting stuff, and I think that the designers amongst us would really like. There's some really good stuff to read, but I mainly go through the components and I look at, for example, the buttons, and then you can see the difference between all buttons and what they mean and what they have. And this actually does also explain a lot about why to use these buttons and where to use these buttons. And you can also see the common goals of these buttons. So whenever we improvise as developers, we can at least look at something and be like, oh, is that even logical to do? Because they do explain what the uses of a button. So as a developer, I still think that, especially on the component part, it's probably smart to read about the component before you use it, just a little bit, so you can use it well. I am going to show you this is the custom color picker, where you can just select any color. So it just has a color wheel, and that will impact your app and show you all the colors. The good thing is, like this, just like any color wheel you've probably seen a lot. The important part about this is that everything here is something directly accessible to us by code, meaning that we can click on export, click on Flutter. We immediately have the entire theme. Nobody has to do anything. We have an entire theme ready to go according to Material Design 3. On top of that, there's also dynamic theming, which picks based on the background of the user's phone, but they have to use Material 3 to use it. So commonly people use a combination of the two if they go for dynamic theming. So much for Material 3. Let's switch back to the presentation and let's go to comparing material design. For that, wait, did I skip? All right, yeah, I already talked a bit about it, but I've got a demo ready and I have to run it first. And I've got one Boolean here at the top. First set the false. And that should allow me to. Build the app real quick. Should not take too long. All right, so you've got an app right here. This is the Material 2 app. I've just made it complete a little bit more. I've added the button here. There's a profile at the top with some filter items here, and then there's a save button which opens a very empty scaffold at the bottom. I will, I can with just one flick of the button, maybe a few, but true, and then we just restart the app. Now we've got the Material 3 version. There is some differences there. Definitely, you can see the difference, especially oh, wait. There you go. It's the Material 3 version. Maybe I should, let me see. Yeah, I'm just gonna use this and then grab this, put it to the side. There we go. All right. You can see some standing in front there. Yeah, this the colors are more toned down. I haven't changed anything about the color scheme. Everything is the same. The app is exactly the same. The only thing I've changed is use Material 3 or not. That's the entire difference in Flutter. And this is I'll actually explain that in a bit, but I'd like you to see if there's anything specifically different you can see. So any elements, any difference in colors that you're noticing that you think what you think is like a big change between Material 3, but except the things that I've already mentioned, I guess. That's a lot. You know, I'm first off colorblind, second off not a designer, so I've missed a lot which I haven't discussed. So I'm gonna like this and then open this up. So I'm just gonna go back to Material 2. And then I'm going to go back to Material 3. Anyone? Give me something that's really different.
Not specifically about the colors, but I see more bedding around all the items, all the buttons.
Yeah, it's a pretty big thing. They just added more white space. Actually, the buttons are about 4 digital pixels larger. So by default, there's 36 in Material 2, but in Material 3, they upped everything to 40, which just creates more, I guess, more spatial.
Way more rounded.
Yeah. Anyone else?
The blue disappears entirely. The blue of the thing that we had in 2 at the top, for example.
Yeah, that's so the blue. So everything is toned down. Nothing is very light anymore. I can enable dark mode quickly. More Maybe I should go back to material 2 in dark mode. See what it's way more gray, way more
contrast.
yeah. It's falls into the background. Let me open some screens again. There's this screen, and then we have you have this screen, and then we have the form. Let me go back to material. And this is back to material 3. Anyone else?
Use one. Got some text. In material 3, talk to us, but not the material 2. So
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't exist in material 2. They added it in material 3. That's a floating action button or a fab. They the button normally in material 2 is elevated on the edge, and this is a smaller one. I'll show you in a bit. Let me just go back to. Also made this a button. As you can see, this button, maybe I should scroll down more. Scroll down more. You can see that this button is more, this bar is way lower, takes up way less space, it's less visible, and this button is just docked on the edge. That's the standard for the material apps. Probably most of you would have seen this button at this position if you ever run Flutter create and then Flutter run.
the text on material 3, the filter with 1, 2, and 3 on it. The text for 1 became completely illegible.
Yeah, I think this one is disabled by default. I have 2 different ones. I just did the check because the segmented button that you saw, it's a good observation that you see there's a difference, but the segmented button that we have in material 3 does not exist in material 2. This is a multi-part button or something. This is close enough to what you would normally be, but if we re-render this, then this is a disabled one. That wasn't really possible in the material 2 one. They didn't have a really structured design language for segmented buttons, but they added them now. And in Flutter, they also exist. So you can just do a segmented button and you create this. You don't have to.
I'm not loving how the text is rendered on the first part of.
This is an icon. There's an ABC icon. I'll change the icon.
We have text next to the icon, right?
The icon is text, yes, but it's a small icon, and I can just make it text. You know what? It's yeah. Let me see. It's ABC sharp icons dot access alarm. You know what? Let's just use that. It's the first. It's a disabled button. I didn't really pick the best icon for that, I must admit. But now that you've seen some of the differences, I'd like to continue about code. That's the thing I like. Everything before this was information I dug up, and there's so much more information. I read a lot, but I just wanted to give you an overview, and I wanted to dive into the code when I could. I can show you a couple of the things that that you can find about Material 3 and how you can use it. For example, let's talk about how you use Material 3. Well, I've made a Boolean at the start, but it's actually as easy as using a Boolean. So if I go to app, and then there is use Material 3, and then you can just give a Boolean true or false. That's the use Material 3. It won't make that much of a difference as I made before, because I filtered out components that are only in Material 2 and that are replaced by Material 3. So if you were to go to Material 3, there are some special components that you would use. For example, Let's go to home because there's a segmented button which has button segments which you can disable or enable. Trailing comma. And then you can set which ones are selected, and then and you can allow multiple selections. And my phone is gone. Let me just. That corresponds to the buttons over here to the right. So that's the segmented buttons. I'm going to. The other one were toggle buttons, but you had a lot less control over them. So you had to give individual text and individual say which are used, and then use have an is selected range. It's a bit odd to use, and I really wouldn't recommend it. But segmented buttons really nice to use and a very interactive way to work with. Same with there's a switch list style. This one is by default uses the switch defined in material design. You probably wouldn't know what this is, but this dark mode button is pretty obvious right here. It's pretty clear what it does. If I flick it, turns light. But if I change, I have to do that here. Change it. That's a read word. Commonly, what we used to do is we just steal the switch from Cupertino. Because that one was big. So whenever a UX designer came with a design, it's like, it's a big switch. Oh, the Cupertino one. I'll just use the Apple one. Doesn't matter if we are on Android or Apple, we just use the Apple one, and that will be much clearer, because this one is very tiny and hardly of use. But also another thing, just by design. Go back. Let's go to home. There is on top of it, there is I'll just go all the way to the top here. There is a scaffold, which normally you use it docked. There's a lot of locations you can put it on. By default, you want to have it docked inside the bar whenever you use a fab on Material 3. And there's an extended floating action button that's new since Material 3, which allows you to put a label next to it. There's a bottom navigation bar, which is larger and takes up more space. And also the floating action button is put inside if you use the docked version. There's a drawer that nothing much has changed here. If you go to the page, you'll see that what's new, they use new colors. That's about what you use. The list styles are more, they are more, they are less visible. They use the same logic as you've seen with the cards and everything. They tone it down. They made it less, the shadow less, less in the room, I guess. Maybe that's the way to say it. And one of the biggest one is the buttons. They completely revamped the button. It's the segmented buttons. There's the tile and about list tile. That's the, let's see. This is the tonal icon. You can use a filled button nowadays. We used to always use elevated buttons. Elevated buttons are basically not done anymore. If you use an elevated button, it will basically become a tonal button if you use Material 3. But the elevated button will be more. How should you say it? The elevated button will be more square, it was more like this. It's the screaming point of tension in the app, I'd say. Whilst this is more part of the app. And I think that's for the home screen, most of it. Then there's the profile screen, which has basically what I used here for all these. I can use on here. What I used here is badges and filters. So I can, for example, say I'm the best in the world and a hypocrite and humble. I can then, I need to look, I change the code a little bit so I don't have to do the same thing 10 times. So I made a wrap in that I created a chip, which the chip is a padding with a badge with a filter chip, and in that some text. There's nothing, nothing in sorts of like some custom containers or some custom parts. I just added some padding, I gave it some text, and then I added a badge and a chip. Chips are these things, these filter chips. There's various chips. You've got suggestion chips, action chips, filter chips, and there's one more chip that I can't exactly remember, but they can all be found in Flutter. You can easily, well, just what you can do is return a, let's say a filter chip. We already used the filter chip, right? Action chip. There you are. And most of the components you find on material, you just enter the exact same name. If it's available in, let's say per component, what's available and what's not, you enter the name and you immediately have a ready to go component that you can use instead of having to define a container with custom borders, with a background and all those kinds of things. It just uses the theme that's given to you. So if, let's say, we ever make an app that's based on the Material 3 standard, then all the UX team has to do is like, here's a lo-fi, here's the color scheme, and we put the components in the right spot, and we basically have a pretty decent looking app. I'm just going to remove this. And other than that, there's been going over most of the things. There's also the message and the about button. Oh, it's probably faster if I do it here. This screen, it's just a dialog. So if you say show dialog, we'll get to this. We'll see this. And there's models, there's the model bottom sheet, and there's a lot of layouts, specific features that are there. I'll go over some packages that are there to help you out with both layout and colors just after this. To go back to my presentation, because I think I'm, what's the time? Okay, thank you. So the screens, I used as many material components. I did not use any custom shapes, decoration, and I didn't use any of my own color. So anything in this app, what you've been seeing right now, the only thing I've been using is components defined on material dial. So I just went to a component, picked it, put it in. I've used reps, columns, and rows to just position things. I used some padding to position things better. And I used scrollables. And now that I think of it, scrollables are probably a really important thing to see. What you haven't noticed is if I scroll, it stretches. And I'm not sure if anyone remembers what Material 2 does for scrolling. If you can't scroll anymore. No, that's bouncing is the iOS Cupertino default behavior. The loading icon is if you have a refresh indicator wrapped around your screen. The actual thing that happens, there's a little blue overlay that comes down, which feels like it kind of intrudes in your design. And this doesn't add color, it just shows like you're trying to scroll, but honestly, there's not much left to scroll, but it does show your actual, it's way too fun to play with. And yeah, and it works everywhere that can be a scrollable screen. So yeah, it's a bit choppy. It's just And with all that, with only these specific contents that I made, the entire app is made. So I used a scaffold with some components in it, with some scrolling tools in it, and then just added some layout. That's time for the code. I think the screens I wanted to show, the packages I want to show, I want to show them those first before I go to discussion, because I really want to have some heated discussion here. I'm going to see what people think. Let's go to, let's see. Oh yeah, I'll show you this later. There's if you go through the Flutter page on Material.io, you can find this page and you can switch between Material 3. You switch between some color schemes, and you can then switch the brightness as well to everyone awake again. And you can see every possible component that there is, and you can see the difference by just flicking Material 2 and Material 3 yourself. This URL, you don't have to write it down. If you go to m3.material.io or just material.io, you will immediately come to a page. You go to develop and then Flutter. So in the menu, you go to develop and Flutter. So that's here, develop, Flutter. And then here, there's the Material 3 Flutter showcase, which you can click on yourself. It's a web page where you can just try everything out for yourself, flick between it. Now for the packages, I told you about dynamic color. Dynamic color is the aspect where you take some user's background and you define the entire color scheme based on that. There is a package that was made, and I'm just going to go to pub.dev and go to dynamic color. And here it is. Takes a while to load. It has a dynamic color builder where we can just load in the color scheme of the user if there is any. So we can say like, oh, there's a user that has a predefined color scheme already on their phone. You just load it in, and then we can build the app with it. If none is provided, you can provide your own. And there's also a harmonized color. So let's say you have some branding, which is probably very important. If you are in UX, you think like, oh, maybe I want my own color scheme to be there, but I still want to use the most of Material U. You can use the harmonize with method based on color. So let's say I want to add a splash of blue on whatever screen they have, but I'm not sure if my blue is going to clash with whatever background they have. The harmonize with method allows the UX designers to define a color scheme, and we're saying, and as developers, we say, okay, that color scheme needs to harmonize with the current color scheme, and then it changes based on that. I really wish I could show you an example of it working, but my phone is Android 11 and it doesn't have an update to Android 12 ready yet, so I can't show you it on here. But if anyone has an Android 12 phone, I really would encourage you to try it and to actually make use of it. The other plugin that I'm thinking of, and I need to really got it in my slides. I'll show you it actually at the slides. Didn't finish this presentation. Slide. Goal is the actual goal is to discuss Material 3, Material 2, and what you think is the use case and what you think is how it can improve lives as developers, but how it also can add to an existing toolkit for UX designers. And that we can all talk about it, but also show our opinions and maybe see what the current environment is and how people think about using existing tools. So, first statement, and I really want you to all open for 5 minutes. Be civil, don't go screaming. But I really want, just very, very basic statement, not too harsh. I think Material Design 3 is a good improvement of Material Design 2. Who agrees, disagrees, and why? Sure, go ahead.
but I don't like much more rounded. I like the square thing. So might be yes, version for I do. I don't know why. No.
Response, anyone?
The color schemes defined really are way less vibrant. Like a yellow one, it's like a metal yellow itself, like a neon yellow.
I must agree. Honestly, I like Material 3 way better than what 2 was, but I was wondering if anyone else was like feeling the same, or someone really against. You don't like the colors?
No, so just, said maybe 1 or 2 examples you had. These dialogues were way better in Material 2, my opinion.
The only thing I dislike is the basic templates where it's like it gets like purple overlay for everything. All that view shows it when you're in the light modes. I do like the dark modes of better.
No, right.
Look like everything became perfect. It's just
I think that's because of the default blue is like hue. It's, I think they use a alternative blue in both situations as the default light theme. And I think with Material 3, they pick a different light theme hue to support it. It's because I use the default theme. I think you can still use different themes, but I'd probably say that it's best to go, if you're using Material 3, to go to the site, enter your colors there, and generate it out of there instead of like. So yeah, the colors, it's very purple, but I don't think you're bound to purple. Quite often. Any shocking arguments here on creation? Is there anyone that says that just without arguing that says, I don't like it? And there's anyone here that says, you know what, I love it?
not the default.
Because it's not completely rolled out across, like most Android devices are still in Android 11, and Flutter is probably going at some point going to move towards Material 3 as a standard. But for now, it's Material 2 has been more of a standard for because it's more in line with all the other Google apps you have on your phone. So as soon as Google is moving to Material 3, you probably see that Flutter is also following. Let's go to statement 2, which is Material Design 3 is sufficient enough to not need a hi-fi design for common use cases. Anyone? Anyone feeling insulted or feeling like
Or something gets away. It's not very.
But would you go and design? That's just.
I moet je gesprek met marketing doen, dus dat beeld in je uitstand gedeeltelijk grotendeels van weggaat.
Ja.
Bij UX ook wel eens een discussie gehad van bij het use case kunnen. We zitten heel vaak wel heel erg vast op schema's. Redelijk verouderd zijn en marketing echt zit een beetje vaak onder dat gebied.
Yeah. But let's say translating, so marketing is the reason for could be a reason to go away from the colors. Let's say, would you redesign this entire button set, so a segmented button like this, whenever you need a use case that would require you to use a button like this, or would you say like we'll use the same but we'll change the colors? anyone here saying like, because personal touch, that's of. Oh, wait. There's a personal touch missing, and what kind of person? I mean, images. Obviously, I didn't use a lot of images here because I wanted to go to a bare minimum and show off components. But what of the personal touch is missing in material design right now? That's not. What would you add in this case to improve it? Which to
I would imagine that there's not so much change, right, between material 2 and 3. It's still both like a basis and a tool for designers. You can't just create an app with only standard buttons on it. It just would look like something that just it would look like something an organization pay money for. It was like the standard thing. All apps would look like. It's the like the customization which creates a lot of value for the client, right?
Yeah. That's a very good one. And I think that's probably a good direction to think about. I think myself, based on what I've seen, I put this statement in here to just add a bit of controversy, so that it's like step on some toes, as you would say. I think that material design is a perfect toolkit to have in your to have a multiple set of toolkits to base yourself upon. And I think it's cool to be able to and share screen, entire screen. There we go. We're back. And what was I about to say? I think that the ability that you can use dynamic color and just harmonize with it, that you can still use custom branding in combination with color, that it's amazing for whenever people are more commonly used to having Android 12 in sort of phones. Obviously, for anything that's not running Android 12, it would just use the custom brand theming that's there. But yeah, I think it's not the all-to answer to every use case. I think as a student or as a for like an internal project where you don't have access to a designer, it's a big improvement over previous material design concepts because it's less of a screaming in your face color mesh that you can easily go to, and it's more of a here is a ready to go theme for you. So that's my personal opinion about it. Last statement, and that's we kind of based on this. Material design threes to limiting and takes away from the custom branded feel of an app. I mentioned it already. I think we've kind of been over that a bit. I see you. Elaborate.
For apps by businesses, probably yes, they have their own branded feel stuff. But at least for me personally, my phone is just full of utilities, not really business kind of stuff. I like notes taking app, chat applications, fashion manager. I'd like those apps to all be in a common system theme, which is different from a company app that has an internal something that wants their branding. So I suppose I would, for personal apps or just simply utilities, I would probably take them as free. But once a customer actually wants their branding all over the app, then I'll probably will take a full design instead.
Do you think that when you use one part of material design, you're immediately locked into the entire material design system?
No.
Or do you think it's common it's more useful. I feel like with previously used material design, going my own opinions here, is that previous used material design was more based on just material design too. It was more in your face whenever you use the material component in a custom branded app. Whilst in this case, if I use a material component in a custom branded app, I probably wouldn't notice as much. I've been going over sketches that have been made within the company, and I try to reimagine certain screens based on purely material design. And aside some, like, because I was really rapidly developing the screens and looking at them, some layout differences. I didn't notice any big differences between what was designed internally and what I used, what I built with material design based on those situations. So I think it's not too limiting. I think it's an addition.
Is there no way to customize material design suite to get the needs you would like? Or is that?
Yeah, there's actually another customization. I've not gone over it. It's called shape. There's a whole list of shapes. I'll show you those. It's probably really interesting. Let me just go to material design and oh, that's the wrong one. Go to styles and is it shape? Here's a whole list of, let's see, shape skill. There we go. There's a whole list of shapes that they elaborate upon and how you use them. By default, it's the rounded buttons, and I prefer the rounded buttons in this case. But that specifically roundedness, that is not a default. If you want to have a really straight line app, it will still fit within material design and go around ideas. It will just be staying 40 device pixels high. It will have the same contrast between the front and the back, and the interaction that you have when you click on the button will also be the same. So it's not just, you're not limited to just that specific shape. So in that there's more.
Can you do this in a 7 though, or can you make your own, create your own? Like what if I want a triangle or something?
You can create your own, but then you will be diverging from material design. At least from what I've read from the many pages, they talk about skills and shapes and how they work and how symmetry works. They have a whole language about it and explain how it should work.
Experience valt heel erg besturen is ook micro-animaties. Dus daarmee proberen ze ook wat is heel veel ook een beetje unieke dingen te zien.
Yeah, I saw some good things about motion overview. It is a pretty great screen where they show this one, how motion defines the app and actually makes the app logical instead of static. I'm going back to the presentation because I'm limiting some time. I'll add some closing words. Probably most of what I've said has already said. In short, Material Design 3 is a really cool tool that you could use to improve your own projects, to add to your toolbox if you want to use a default component that basically solves all your issues in a very specific use case. You can just grab it out. It's not an answer to every single set of every single screen, but it can definitely help. And I think it's really cool that we are moving towards a space where you can have more customized screens and that it's more user driven in that set. And also looking back about the process, that was about the content of this version, looking back about the process. I'm once again, developer, I'm talking about design stuff. If I knew what exactly this presentation was going to be, I probably would have delegated it to someone who is probably more proficient in the content of this meetup. But I did learn a lot, and I think I already had some respect for designers, but I think I have a little bit more now. It's there's a lot. There's so much that it's impossible to read everything that's defined there. And there's so much thought has gone into everything. And I'd like to thank you all for participating, for just also sharing your opinions to make this meetup more of a conversation as well as just a presentation from one side. And I hope you've learned something, you've added something new. And as a bonus, I'm going to show you, like, I've got a whole link of content. I'll probably share the entire link with everyone. There's a mailing list of everyone, right? So I'll just share the link to the presentation so everyone can view it. And the last slide is a list of all the information you can find. I'll make sure that everyone gets it. And if you want to know how to use Flutter and you're like, I'm not sure how to use it, you can always follow the Flutter basic training guide. And for the people that have been developing Flutter, this is a really cool thing, not specific for material design, but I found it in the research. It's a cool bonus. It adds a default layout for creating apps that are based on platform and large scales. Everything that we've been doing for example, Beep, has been solved. It's called canonical. It's called canonical layouts, and it makes changes to screens and changes the where everything is on the screen based on what you're using, what device size you're using, and what if you're using touch or not. And this really improves the ability for a developer to quickly make multi like really responsive design parts. And they have also an entire page about how to work with foldables and all that kind of stuff. I only want to go.